How does homosexuality, including lesbianism and pansexuality, enter into God and the perfect creation, perfect symmetry? Going back to the stone, God tells me, had within it, first of all, there is, according to many scholars, and it doesn't make sense within Hinduism, Buddhism, there is no such thing as nothing. So, for everything to exist, there can never have been nothing. There is no such thing as nothing. There is dark matter, we know, and there's no such thing as nothing in outer space. So, in the beginning, we know that according to the Hindus, Vishnu had no beginning, he has no end. So, the stone represents Vishnu, and in essence, it is also Gaia, the first Gaia, the first creation, a stone, like the earth, and that within the stone was in fact the other parts of God, the strong force and the weaker force between atoms. The strong force being the people who are good, and the weaker force being those who are evil. Or, in another way, which is a simplistic way, God and the perfect creation, first cherub, who we say is Lucifer. Now, may have misinterpreted that. Could be Jesus. No, that doesn't make sense. So Gaia, God, and a perfect creation. That goes back to Gaia being a fallen, in the second part, being a fallen being of Earth, and she giving birth to the lower forms of man, or the apes, and then ultimately through Kronos creates Adam and Eve. Well, Kronos was a fallen being in the Christian pantheon religion, so therefore, as we know, something had to have entered into Adam and Eve. And what I believe is true through my theory, and like I say, it just ends up being what I've interpreted through all of these movies and films and songs and poems and all seven religions, is that there had to have been a choice for Adam and Eve to be straight in a sexual union together and create male and females, sons and daughters. And you see this struggle between men and women who are in the majority straight and want to be in union, in a straight union, like within Better Call Saul, which is an offshoot of Breaking Bad, where you see throughout the entire Netflix series that Saul is always intending, you see so many references to this, to be a straight man, to not be, and I'm sorry to use the word crooked, Ben, which is just an old phrase for homosexuality, and now we don't use that anymore. But that in its essence is what every man must do. Even though he wants to be with the woman, he is in essence making a choice to be with her and go and get her. And Eve is in fact making a choice. It has to be free will. There has to be, in essence, an attraction to a woman or a man, but you have to go and get her or him and be in that union. And it explains why within, like I said, I've talked about in hilarious terms Blackadder, but within Blackadder there is a story of Bob, and it's an hilarious story where you have a woman who disguises herself as a man, and Blackadder falls in love with him, but there is no sexual contact union, and he gets worried about it, and she falls in love with him, and eventually she reveals herself as a woman, and then obviously, it's hinted that there's a sexual union, and Bob comes back within Blackadder goes forth. Psychologists know throughout hundreds of years that majority of men and women are straight, but every human is attracted to the same sex, but there doesn't have to be a sexual union with that sex, or even the fact that they are attracted to their genitals or anything. It's just that there is this bond, and an overwhelming, not overwhelming, but there's a majority of women in the statistics that say they've had a sexual partner with a woman, and that they do in fact enjoy it, but it doesn't make them gay, and the majority end up with a man. But also, every woman I've ever spoke to has said that they've actually had a union, a kiss, sexual contact, sex with a woman. So it's more or less 100% of women do this. Now, it explains why God allows the pagan world to re-enter the world as it is now, pagan times, which includes the days of Noah, which it says pagan times, and Sodom and Gomorrah. He allows it into the world again. So we make the ultimate choice. Now, there's also the added part of Cain being, according to many scholars, the seed of Satan. This is hinted at and alluded to in Genesis, where we have obviously the first murderer. This wasn't found in Adam and Eve, so it had to have come from Satan. And there within it, for those who don't believe in Ben David, is the prophecy of how Adam's seed will in fact bruise the heel of the devil. And this is alluded to in Jeremiah, how he will in fact cut a striking blow like David and Goliath against Apollo, who will die but be resurrected. So it's just a blow. Ultimately only God can kill the devil, well, put him to rest, but he is immortal, he will always live. Now, there is this overwhelming amount of pansexuality in the younger generations, and it's very, very much in the minority in the older generations. And obviously, we've had Judaism, Christianity, and Islam that state nothing is really evil, as it were, but we have to make a choice to be a better person, to follow Jesus and have love. Ultimately, it's said that it's between a man and a woman. But it goes back to the fact that it has to be a choice. And obviously, a lot of gay people will say they were always born with an attraction to the same sex. But this continuum of attraction is in fact malleable between the generations in just a couple of decades. It's so malleable that if you teach, I mean, I'm not a trained psychologist or psychiatrist, I've got a master's degree, but if you condition boys at an early age to kiss, touch, and basically love and find naked girls attractive, then this is a social reward, and it carries on throughout his life. Similarly with females, and the culture with Netflix and Hollywood and the media and governments across the world accepting homosexuality marriages, and there's no doubt it's had an impact upon younger generations. There may be even, as Alex Jones says in Look for Wars, a chemical reason for it as well within the water, and I'm not a scientist so I wouldn't know, but there is evidence for that. Even Freud himself, the father of psychology, who many obviously use as a tool, not actually proof of anything, that there were in fact two types of homosexuality or lesbianism. One was in fact chemical, neurochemical, and one was in fact a type of choice. Like I say, it's hinted at throughout myriad films that men have to make a choice, even though they always found women attractive and girls find men attractive. How can one have free will if one was always born straight? But it leads back to the fallen angels, who were in fact, um, many of them pansexual, uh, including Zeus, and he had homosexual affair, and also many of the gods, and obviously Loki himself, who had unions with women, especially like Echo and Venus. But ultimately, throughout the series of Loki in Disney Plus, we see that he fell in love with himself in that movie, within the series, and that they labeled him like almost like a narcissist, which is where we get, like, so mentioned before, like Blur's new song, or from their latest album, The Narcissist, where we have the Pyrrho. A Pyrrho definitely be a reference to Hermes Loki the Fool. Him looking in the mirror, feeling sad, and wanting to put things right and not fall. Many, if not all, women say exactly what the psychologists have said in the literature, which is that say majority want to be with men, but they most women just don't deny that women are attractive, and that it is in fact the union of a man and a woman and say a penis that is what they are ultimately get the highest high, and obviously child. And majority of men I know from school were always straight. They were always obsessed with girls and women. But then as the generations, my friends got older, and my friends, there are a lot of friends, as we all know, who are bisexual, and now we have a generation of people who are LGBTQ and everything in between. Pansexual basically is the rainbow. Um, but Christians don't really talk about it. Muslims don't, and nor do Jews. And they can't really understand how it could be that God allows it to happen in the ancient world and allow it back now. Ultimately saying that one should choose to be in a straight relationship. And then even saying, Jesus does, that when we are angelic beings, after we lose our organic body matter and we become basically, the term is like angels, we won't be in unions of marriage anymore. But we will still be sexual beings because the angels are sexual beings. And all these planetary systems that are out there that the Book of Mormon alludes to, and that all physicists say there are other worlds, and we know from evidence is that from those who say that these angels or aliens were here, there must have been other worlds, and therefore there are children. Obviously that means sex. So I don't know that part through what I've been saying about perfect symmetry, but what I do know is that I am straight, but I think Adam and Eve were in essence bisexual beings, and that this in itself would lead to a fall through Adam and Eve's basic dysfunction of not knowing the right path, as it were, and that they obviously ended up in a union, had children, and basically died in union, arm in arm together. And if you have a fallen Gaia, then you must have a realignment of her through the Holy Spirit. And you must have a perfect being, Jesus, that comes from, like I say, Adam in the first place. And that he was a virgin, Jesus. So there we have all the sexualities and why it's all allowed to exist, and why even though there is this union of man and woman, which is God itself, because of children, because we even have imperfect symmetry. I'll have to find a new word to say, right, but just harmony, perfection. We have Jesus was born of the Holy Spirit and Mary, and Joseph was simply his stepfather. That's in a perfect alignment with Kronos, Gaia, and Loki, and then Ben David. Because, in essence, it's basic. Scholars have said through Ron Wyatt, an American archaeologist, who online and in YouTube you can find in books, stated many years ago in the 80s and 90s that he just made many discoveries about the Bible. One of them being the exact location of Sodom and Gomorrah. You can see on YouTube and films where there's literal balls of sulfur and ashes in sediments, and even a sphinx which has been what's the word? How Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed through that, and it obliterated everything, made it into this sediment, and you can see it in this video, and many people have been to see it, and it doesn't exist, this amount of sulfur, anywhere else in the world in this way. Just rained sulfur. Now, brimstone, that's the word, fire and brimstone. The whole story of Sodom and Gomorrah wasn't all about homosexuality. That story in itself was about a choice, because the inhabitants of there were two towns, Sodom and Gomorrah, both next door to each other, but within it, the inhabitants were having homosexual relations, and I believe it's Lot was told to even offer up his daughters so that they could have a union. And then these inhabitants spoke to angels and wanted to have sexual relations with the angels. And it was this literal going against what God wanted, a choice that's hinted at is the reason why those two towns were destroyed. But it doesn't mean that God doesn't allow free will. So everything becomes a choice in the end times. We have, the tree of life being Jesus in the end, and we have the tree of good and evil, or the fig tree, or science, as the Rosicrucians say. And even that, going back to Buddha and the Buddha Prince Siddhartha, he himself found enlightenment underneath a fig tree. I think that's so symbolic of the fact that Buddha himself, albeit what many secular people say, he did exist. He existed around about 500 AD, and he did find enlightenment, but ultimately he was Vishnu and this cherub that fell, which aligns up with the fact that if Ben David gets to be a perfect being, but isn't perfect to begin with, even when he is given God's powers, like in Bruce Almighty, when God Trevor takes over again, like maybe it's only symbolically a day, as it were, that Ben-David becomes that father, it makes sense that he would fall after that. That something would happen within him. That maybe it wasn't quite the fall within him, but he creates a perfect being because he wants to delegate everything to that being to ultimately create Brahma, who creates a universe. It makes sense that this happens because Brahma is just the creator of this universe. Now, this is getting so in depth that, I hope you're following. Like I say, I'm just explaining to people who are secular and people who haven't actually read all 7 major religions, their texts, and I've watched all these films, I've read poems, and I've looked at books. These are my assertions, obviously theories, upon which there stands so much reason behind. And it's said that Vishnu is the preserver of the multiverse. So this universe has one Brahma, but every universe has a Brahma, a creator of that universe. So ultimately, this has to be delegated to perfect beings in the beginning that eventually fall through pride and wanting sex, fornication with women. Now, this reasoning allows for psychology to come to the fore, as it were, and the acceptance of the younger generation, and obviously there are older generations who are bisexual, pansexual, but because it's so prevalent within the younger generation, Gen Z, and they are in fact loving people, loving humans. God says, do not judge, do not do unto others as you would do to yourself. So the culture war between, say, right and left, it has to be unified in something. And this is the unification of that process through which I even watch just YouTube will pull up videos based upon what I'm saying, obviously, through their algorithms. And Jordan Peterson talks about the perfect universe. Like I say, Jonathan Cahn's been talking about the paradigms and all sorts of revelations for many years now. And how can things be good and bad at the same time? It's a simple way of saying it, that there has to be a choice of some kind. And if we allow love to guide us, then obviously we have to have children. And children are the bedrock of humanity. And even if none of this is real and we just carry on for millions of years, um, and everything's secular in reality, we have to have we have to encourage boys to find girls attractive, because we will die out if we don't. And that may seem like an alarmist way of saying it, you know, but in just 10, 15 years, we can't have upwards of 45% of kids having a pansexual identity, because in a million years that might go up, but it might go down. But that's the reason why I think, and I've been told by God as well, that all the Abrahamic faiths have this as a bedrock of their belief. And if you have a mother and father, which everybody has, then it makes sense that you would want children, especially what scholars say the millennial kingdom is largely about, is replacing all the children on earth. And that, again, it's ambiguous as to why there is marriage on earth and it's so sacred between a man and a woman, and then ultimately there is no law that says that one has to be with a woman married for eternity. And I think these things ultimately are still to be revealed. And I'll read some more of the texts, especially the Hindu texts, of which definitely the Genesis reads from, in that Brahma cut up the universe, or whatever there was before the universe, into three parts. One of them being a snake, I believe, which is Leviathan in the Bible, and chaos to the Greeks, and Vishnu did in fact give birth to the multiverse, as it were, and Brahma through his navel. The Hindus have Vishnu largely as a male depiction, but I don't think if you spoke to a Hindu they would say Vishnu is specifically a male. I'm not sure, but it makes sense that the original creation before, which was a stone, which led up to Gaia, stone the earth, it would also be a female, or a version of femininity, because then you have, like in the Passion of Christ, Passion, where we have Mel Gibson's film, we have the devil Satan coming as a woman, and I thought many people were amazed by that, and it was a wonderful performance. And there will be a sequel to the Passion, Mel Gibson says, coming. Whatever people say, I'm not an expert on this matter. I am simply stating what I believe, and when these events occur, like I believe they will, maybe even next year, we'll be on this journey together. I hope that the new film will give revelations about what it was, even on an even higher level, as obviously Mel Gibson, who wrote the screenplay for the first movie and write the second, it's taken him so long, knows so much more in relation to Jesus and his story, and if he indeed did descend into hell, and what really happened. And he'll be privy to maybe text that I don't know. So I'm looking forward to that film.